All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Let us begin a good night. Begin by thanking our sponsors. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Nisan, Jerry and Abby Applebaum for dedicating the Shiurim this month in memory of Basya Bas Chaim, David Ben Avram. Doctors Paul and Linda Weinberg for dedicating the Shiurim in memory of Mordechai Yoshua, Ben Paris Moshe, Balea Miriam. Paul and Kathy Pollock for dedicating the Shiurim in the Schus of Refuah Shalema. For Donna Baker Matson, Stephen Terry Zinn, for dedicating the Sherman in honor of the birth of their grandson, Bunim Tzvi Hirsch Zinn, Naftali Tilson, for dedicating the Shurim with gratitude to his chaver, Benjamin Wall, and with wishes for Echad Kosher V'Sameach to the entire Shir, and Avram and Shane Kalman for dedicating the Shurim in the schos of Leah for the neshama of Sarah Braina Bas Yoshua Heschel. We hope to have the merit of our Talmud Torah. All of the neshamas will have an aliyah, their families in nechama, and above. With that, let us begin. We have a very exciting daf ahead of us today. Today's daf is Mem Hey. We left off on Mem Daled Amud Beis 44b in the wide lines, 2, 4, 6, 8 lines up from the bottom. So you must remember again, we're dealing now with the incredibly riveting sugya, and we're going to see actually very, halacha l'maisa about which type of illegal relationships go ahead and impact the genealogical legitimacy or kashrus of offspring. Here's what we've seen. We've seen that there are many different types of illegal relationships, but not all of them have the same ramification on children. So we saw a fundamental machlokes in the Mishnah on Amud Beis of the extreme sheet of Rabbi Akiva. I was thinking about this. I don't think I mentioned this in yesterday's shir, but what's so fascinating is Rabbi Akiva is the paradigm of gentility, right? Optimism, hope. It's rare that you find Rabbi Akiva, being the one who holds an extreme position. It's just throughout Shas, that's not Rabbi Akiva. This Gemara is the exception because Rabbi Akiva is the most extreme position in this Gemara, the idea that even a relationship punishable by a lav will create mamzerus is one of the most extreme positions there is the most extreme position there is in this particular topic. So remember again, you have Rabbi Akiva in the Mishnah, and the Chachamim saying, halacha l'maisa no. Chachamim saying no, that's not the case. Now the truth is, Rabbi say, even the Chachamim agree with Rabbi Akiva in the case of machzir grushaso, as we saw in yesterday's daf, and the truth is, what we are going to see is that halacha l'maisa, is that, give me one moment here. Too much technology. Remember the good old days? You just gave a share, that was it. Okay, so I'll say, what I'll point out over here is that halacha l'maisa, we did see the position of Rabbi Shimon HaTimni as well. And Rabbi Shimon HaTimni was of the opinion, which we're going to see is the halacha l'maisa opinion, namely, that it is only chayve krisos that go chayve krisos chayve misa that create mamzerus. So we see like this. Ella iitmar hach iitmar. Am Rabbi Yosef, am Rabbi Shimon beRabbi. Hakam odim ba'al chayve krisos shavlad pagum. I will say everyone agrees that when a man has relations with a woman, where you have a relationship that is punishable by kares, everyone agrees the child is pagum. That was, remember again, we saw this term yesterday for the first time. Well, we've seen it mentioned before. What does pagum mean? Pagum really is pagum means blemished, right? Damaged. Truth is, it really means impaired, right? We remember again in Smichas Chavar we had this concept. You could have a kos that's pagum, right? What does it mean if the kos is pagum? You go and you make kiddush on a cup of wine, you drink from it, you can't use that same cup of wine for kiddush again. Right, the cup is considered to be stunted, right, or impacted. So remember, when we say the child is pagum, we pointed out in yesterday's daf already. This is really only a status that applies to a girl, and what it says is she would not be able to marry a kohen. That's what it means to be pagum. So it says the Gemara, everyone agrees that if a man has a child with a woman who's a chayve krisos, that the vlad is pagum. Mana komodim, who is that? Rabbi Shimon. Ta'afar of Rabbi Shimon in mamzer mechayve krisos. even though Rabbi Shimon held that halacha l'maisa, again, there's no mamzer mechai b'krisus, nehid the mamzer lo havi, even though he holds that it doesn't produce mamzerus, miha, the Gemara says, pagum miha havi. Nevertheless, the offspring will at least be pagum mikal v'chomer. And this is based on mikal v'chomer. Kama chomer removed from almana. Uma almana l'kohen gadol sheini sur shavah bakol. When it comes to an almana, to a kohen gadol, where I will say, the isser of an almana is not across the board, right? The isser of almana is unique to a kohen gadol. Yet, the Gemara says, if she marries a kohen gadol and they have a child, that offspring is pagum. Zu sheisura shava bakal. This particular person, again, the isser kares, where the isser applies to everyone. In other words, I both say everyone has the same isser kares. Eino din shabina pagum. Then all the more so, her offspring should be pagum. V'chi tema. Maybe you'll say mala almana shekain hi atzma mischalales. Hachanami kevan shabayla sazona. Maybe you say almana is different. Almana is different, right? Because halacha l'maisa, she herself becomes a halala, right? But then when Almana marries a Kohen Gadol, she herself experiences a level of disqualification through this forbidden union. So maybe that's what makes it different. So Shemar says, no. The truth is, even in a case where a man has relations with a woman who is an Isser Kares, ultimately, again, I will say, that gives her the status of a Zona, which would then preclude her from marrying a Kohen afterwards. So she also becomes disqualified through the Ma'aseh. Okay? We'll see what the halacha l'maaseh is in all of this. So we'll say, this is now an extreme Gemara. Another extreme Gemara. Listen to this. Rabbi Barachana says, name Rabbi Yochanan, everyone agrees that if a non-Jewish man, be it an Eved or an Ovid Kochavim, fathers a child with a Jewish woman, that the child is a mamzer. Wow. To which the Gemara says, Man hakol modim. We'll say, who is everyone? Right? Who's, whenever people say, everyone says, okay, who's everyone? It turns out that it's 1.5 people, right? Who's everyone that says that if a non-Jew fathers a child with a Jewish woman, that the offspring is a mamzer? To which the Gemara says, Shimon HaTimni. Da'afagav damer Shimon HaTimni in mamzer mechayve lavin, even though Shimon HaTimni Rabosai, who's really representative of the halacha l'maisa opinion, even though Shimon HaTimni says that in general, only relations with an Isser Kares goes ahead and creates a mamzer, he agrees, right? In other words, or let me say it differently, Shimon HaTimni holds that a relationship with an Isser Lav will not go ahead and create mamzerus, top of Hani Mili, top of Memhei, Hani Mili Mechavi Lavin, the Taf Sibahu Kiddushin. That's only true of us, why? By Chavi Lavin. Because remember again, by Chavi Lavin, Kiddushin is Tofsin. Right? Remember again, Abba said, this is very important. A simple case. A Kohen marries a Grusha. Legal or illegal? Mutter Aser? Aser. Yet, if they stand under the chuppah, he gives during her At Mekudesh Asibet Devasu Gidas Moshe V'Yisrael. Are they married? Yes. So ultimately, again, Shimon HaTimni says, if you have a union that could work, it can't create mamzerus. That's Shimon HaTimni's logic. In other words, mamzerus is the result of a forbidden illicit union that cannot become a union. But an Isser Lav, which although it is Aser, the marriage can be affected. Halach l'maisa doesn't create a Lav. Doesn't create a mamzer. Aval hocha, but over here, Ovid kocham ve'eved kemendol tav sibu kiddushin kechai ve'krisus tami. Both say an incredible position. Shimon HaTimni says it's only chai ve'lavin that don't create mamzerim. But halacha l'maisa, when you have an eved or an akum fathering a child with a Jewish woman, there's no kiddushin in that case. Because there's no kiddushin, it's almost the equivalent, it is the equivalent of chai ve'krisus, although it's not a chiyuv kares, but it's the halachic equivalent of chai ve'krisus, and therefore the offspring will be mamzerim. Very strong. Meis Svedim, where is the kasha? Ovid kochav ve'eved abba abbas Yisrael havlad mamzer. So Ovid kochav and eved, who has a child with a Jewish woman, the offspring is a mamzer. Rabbi Shimon Yehuda Omer, ein mamzer ela mimi she'isuro iser erva va'anosh karis. Rabbi Shimon Yehuda says no. Mamzerus is only the result of a union, ultimately again of someone who's an erva and an iser kares. Those are the criteria for mamzerus: erva and kares. Amar Rav Yosef mana kol modim. So we'll say, so who is the one who agrees that ultimately eved va'akum haba abbas yisrael avlad mamzer? To which the Gemara says, Rebbe, afal gav de Rebbe Omer ein hadvarim halalu amurim el de Rabbi Akiva, even though Rebbe said that this is only stated according to Rabbi Akiva. Shaya ose chalutza ke'erva v'lei lo sirale. He said ultimately again chalutza is like an erva, even though he himself did not subscribe to this opinion. B'avid kochavim ve'eved moda. Even Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi says even Rabbi Akiva would agree that halacha l'maisa, that halacha I'm supposed to remember again. Okay, even Rabbi Akiva would agree that Ovid Kochavim and Eved Haba Bas Yisrael, ultimately the Vlad is a mamzer. Dechi asa Rav Dimi am Rav Yitzchak bar Rav Dumi b'shum Rabbeinu, Ovid Kochavim ve'Eved Haba Bas Yisrael, Havlad mamzer. Okay, so I will say, so we see traction for this particular opinion. Rabbi Acha Sarabia of Rabbi Tanchum Bered Michia. So we'll say, so again, this is just another opinion now thrown into the mix. So we've got Rabbi Akiva kind of on one end of the spectrum, Shimon HaTimni on the other side of the spectrum, and now kind of in the middle over here is this other position being dangled about an Ovid Kochavim and an Akum, Haba Abbas Yisrael, Vlad Mamzer. The Gemara is suggesting that even Shimon HaTimni, who normally holds that the only type of relationship which produces mamzerus is what kind of relationship? Iser kares / erva, will agree that Eved and Akum, who fathers a child with a Jewish woman, the offspring is a mamzer. Why? Because again, Shimon Timni will say, since there's no kiddushin, it's effectively like an Iser erva. Okay, let's see where we go with this. So the Gemara goes weiter. Rabbi Acha Sarabia, Bira, Rabbi Tanchum, Bereit Rabbi Chia, Ish Kfar Akos. We'll say, listen to this story. So Rabbi Acha Sarabira. So we'll say that was his Sarabira, that was his title, right? Or it could also be the name of the place where he was from. So Rabbi Acha Sarabira, Rabbi Tanchum, Bereit Rabbi Chia, Ish Kfar Akos from Akko, Pirok Hano Shivuyasa, Da Asume Armon Literia. There were a couple of Jewish women who were taken captive by Gentile captors, and they redeemed these women as they were being transported from Armon to Tveria. Armon to Tveria. Havachada de Arame Oved Kochavim, one of these women was violated by her captors and was pregnant from one of her captors. Va'asula kamed Rabbi Ami. And ultimately again, and they came before Rabbi Ami. Amr Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Chanina, Amri Ovid Kochavim ve'Eved Haba Bas Yisrael Vlad Mamzer. So ultimately, so again, obviously this woman came for a psak halacha. What is going to be with her child? Right? What's going to be the status of her child? So also Rabbi Ami, so Rabbi Ami said to them, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Chanina, Da'amri Ovid Kochavim ve'Eved Haba Bas Yisrael Havlad Mamzer. Ultimately, again, they said, offspring between a Jewish man and non-Jewish woman ultimately is a mamzer. So we'll listen to this. Amar Rav Yosef, Rabusa lemechshav gavri. Do you think that it is an accomplishment to rattle off names of people who are machmir? Harav u'Shmuel beBavel, v'Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi bar Kafra be'Eretz Yisrael, v'Amri leChalufei bar Kafra, Ayli ziknei darim da'amri, Ovid Kochavim va'Eved Haba Bas Yisrael Havlad Kasher. So we'll say, listen to this, quite amazing. So Rav Yosef gets upset because Rav Yosef felt that Rabbi Ami was just being unnecessarily machmir on this woman. It's true, there are positions, there are opinions who are machmir, but there are also plenty of positions who are mekel, right? I will say, look at this. We've got Rav and Shmuel, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Bar Kafra. Okay, so the attribution might be a little bit exchanged, but Lamaisa, you've got plenty of people who are mekel as well. So here, this woman is coming before you for a psak halacha. Ultimately, again, Rabbi Ami, why are you reflexively machmir? In other words, Why align with the positions who are machmer any more than the positions who are mekel? Quite amazing, I will say. Quite profound. Ela Amar Rabbi Yosef, Rebbe he, Tichi Aser. So I will say, I'll just point out. I will say, isn't it fascinating? Isn't it fascinating that, like we say in Koheles, Shlomo says in Koheles, in Chodesh Tachas Hashemesh. Right? I will say, I just want to point out, like you see, by the way, what is happening now contemporarily with the sexual violence that is occurring from the Russian soldiers to the Ukrainian women. Right? I will say, isn't it, we think that like we make advances as humanity, right? But yet the base behaviors of mankind never change. People take advantage of other people. And when people are in a position of power and others are not, people exploit that power all of the time. So you could be learning Gemara Maseches Yevamos Daf Mem He Amud Aleph. You could be reading news headlines out of Ukraine, and it's an amazing thing how far we come. It's like, on one hand, we send people to space and we do anything and everything, and yet we can't overcome our most base behaviors. Isn't it the incredible dialectic of humanity? We're so advanced, and yet ultimately, again, we are so far behind. We see our avoda, sometimes we recognize, that our avoda is not to get to the moon. Getting to the moon is great. It's fun, fantastic. Our avoda is just to not be animals. It's mamish, just don't be an animal. And when you have the opportunity to be an animal, overcome that most base desire to be an animal. That's the pinnacle of human accomplishment. So incredible. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi he, rather reflects the of Rabbi Dichi Asr Avdimi, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Barav Duim Mishun Rabbeinu, Amru Oved Kuchav Me'evad Abba Abbas Yisrael Havlad Mamzer. I will say, by the way, I want to point out, this may be one of the most important sugyas that we have learned in this entire Masechta, and quite possibly in Shas. Why? Because I will say, the ramifications of this question of the offspring of a Jewish man and a non-Jewish woman will tilt the scales of Klal Yisrael. Because ultimately, again, intermarriage is a severe issue. We live in bubbles. So we think like it's a severe issue that's still rocking Klal Yisrael to this day. The notion or the question of whether or not the offspring of a non-Jewish man and a Jewish woman is a mamzer, is overwhelming, is absolutely overwhelming. So this is an incredibly important sugya. So the Gemara says, it's Rebbe. Listen to this. The Gemara says as follows, because what happened? Because the Rabbi Shmuel Levi Omer Havlad Mikulkol. So Rabbi Shmuel Levi says, no. The kid is not a mamzer. The kid is Mikulkol. Mikulkol. Now, what does that mean? I will say messed up. Hey, so I will say, is that pogum? Is that pogum? It's not. Here's what we know: is that ultimately, again, it's not mamzerus. It's not mamzerus. To which the Gemara says, Laman. So we'll say, what does it mean, Mikulkol? Laman, who is he Mikulkol for? If it's that he can't marry into the general Jewish population, Hamra Yeshua Havlad Kosher Ela Lakuna. So we'll say rather, Mikulkol must mean what? Pagum. It's another word for pagum. The Kulu Amarai Demachshiri Modu Shavlad Pagum Lakuna. Because we'll say, here's what's clear. Halacha Lamaisa, everyone who holds that the offspring of a non-Jewish man and a Jewish woman, even if you hold the child is not a mamzer, the child is for sure what? Is what? Pagum. Which I will say once again means what? If it's a girl, she cannot marry into the kahuna. That's what it means. So what the Gemara is pointing out is, even if you hold that akum haba abbas Yisrael does not create mamzeros, it definitely does leave a genealogical impact, right? That's for sure. There's a pogrom issue, to which the Gemara says, Mikavachomer lakuna, me'amar, excuse me. I will say same kavachomer we keep quoting over and over. First wide line, mem hamad aleph. Ma'amana the kohen gadol sheini surah shava bakol, and amana to a kohen gadol, where the isser is not equivalent by everyone. So what happens? Pogrom b'na pogrom. Offspring is pogrom. Zushi surah bakol. Eno din shavina pogrom. Ma'la amana kohen gadol shekein hi atzma mischalalas Tacha nami kevan sheniva la pasas. We'll say again. We're saying Chavachar. We're quoting over and over. Don't Rabbi Yochanan Shurim Rabbi Shimon. Minay laovid kocham ve'eved Abba kohanes v'alaviyah v'ali Yisrael shepasluha. We'll say, listen. Rabbi Yochanan says like this. Near Rabbi Shimon. How do you know that if an ovid kochavim or an akum has relations with a kohenes, right, the daughter of a kohen, or a Leviah, daughter of a Levi, v'ali Yisraelis or Yisraelis shepasla, that ultimately again she's psula. They're about to say, what does psula mean? If she's a bas kohen, she can't eat truma, right? And ultimately, again, if she's a Leviah or a Yisraelis, she would not be able to marry a kohen. Shene'emar ubas kohen kisihya amana ugrusha. Mish yeshlo amanos v'gerushin ba yatsu ovei kochav me'eved she'ein ba amanos v'gerushin ba. So we'll say this is actually very interesting. Essentially, what the Gemara is suggesting over here is that Allah Lamaisa, when a woman has relations with a man with whom she cannot have kiddushin, so that effectively makes her into a zona. And once she becomes a zona, she is prohibited from marrying into the kahuna. Amarle Abaye, my chazis the samchis arav, dar adrav dimi, samach adrabin. Why are you relying on the position of Dimi? Raj relying on the position of Rabin. Dichi asa Rabin, Amar Rabin Asa, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Morim ba lehatera. Ultimately, again, they say that she is permitted. Uman Rabbi Yehuda, Man Rabbi Yehuda, Uman Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rabbi v'af Rav More ba hetera. Even Rav agreed that she's mutaris. Well, so listen to this story. Dahi da asla kamei de Rav. There was a particular woman who came before Rav. Amar lai ovid kocham ve'ever abba bas Yisrael mahu. Right? And I'm sorry, let me take a step back. Not a woman, a man. Hahu da asla kamei de Rav. We'll say there was a guy who came before Rav. Now, who is this guy? Look at Rashi. Last short line of Rashi into the first wide line. Ben Oved Kochavim Yisraelis. Rabbi said, listen to this case. There was a guy. What's his story? His father was not Jewish. His mother was Jewish. Okay? So this was this guy. He came before Rav. So he asked Rav, what is my status? What's the status of the offspring between a non-Jewish man and a Jewish woman? Amar lehu, havlad kosher. Rav said, totally kosher. Amar le, havli barteich. So what did the young man say? I'd love to marry your daughter, Rav. I'd love to marry your daughter. Lo yahiv nolach. Rav said no. Amar, so the Gemara says, Amar sim barchi Rav. Amri inshi. Gamla b'madai akabarakta. So Rabbi say, listen to this. So Simi Bar Chia said to Rav, there's a famous expression. I guess it was a famous expression. Gamla b'madai akabarakta. A camel in Madai could dance in a small barrel. That's what it means when it says kaba de kada. Could go ahead and dance in a kada, in a jug that holds a kav. So I guess is the expression, a big camel could dance in a small jug. All right, that was Rabbi say. Again, it doesn't translate as well. If you look in the first wide line, Rashi says, Amri inshi kamla b'mada akabarakta, gamal gadol, mirakid b'soch kav katan b'dal raglav, b'malchus madeg v'guzma. So we'll say, this was the expression that people used for like exaggerated situations, right? A big camel dancing in a small jug. Now what does this mean? V'ha gamla, v'ha madai, v'lo rakta. So he said, the jug is here, the camel's here, but yet there's no dancing. In other words, what he's saying is, Rav, you hold that halacha l'maisa, that the offspring of a non-Jewish man and a Jewish woman is totally fit, right? Totally kosher. So ultimately, again, do the dance. In other words, that the camel's here, the jug is here, right? You're here, this guy is here. Do the dance, let the marriage happen, and again, see, what they're really showing Rav was, you have an opportunity to back up your psak halacha by actually following it over here. And it would make a splash, right? In other words, people would hear about it, people would see it, and they would see not only are you espousing an idea, but ultimately you're living by it as well. Amar le imiuk Yeshua ben Nun lo yahivni barti. So Rav said, even if this guy was like Yeshua ben Nun, I would not marry my daughter off to him. Amrlei, Ihavak Yoshua ben Nun, Mar lo Yohiv le, Achrini Yohiv le. So they said back to Rav, if this guy was like Yoshua ben Nun, he wouldn't need your daughter for a shidduch, because everybody would want him. So the Gemara says, Hi, Imar lo Yohiv le, Achrini lo Yohiv le. Rav said, so they said to Rav, if you don't marry your daughter off to this guy, no one is going to marry their daughter off to him. Lo hava ka'azal mikameh. So I will say, the guy would not leave Rav alone, right? The suitor, the potential suitor would not leave Rav alone. Yohiv ba einai v'shachiv. Literally, Rav set his eyes upon him, and the guy passed away. So I will say, a very strong Gemara. So this idea, so first of all, a couple of things. Number one, if Rav says no, let it go, right? That's lesson number one, right? It does not work well to pester Rav, which I will say, on a deeper level, that sometimes no is no. In other words, sometimes we have to respect people when they say no, right? To just stop, right? There are times where you should push, but then there are other times where you have to respect people's autonomy. I will say, the other piece to think about is, they're pressuring Rav to marry off their daughter to this guy, and Rav is saying no. Even though halachically, Rav said that halach l'maisa is permitted. So I'll say, when you look at this story, Rav emerges as the bad guy from this story. But I think there's a very profound yesod, which is what? I'll say, a parent's obligation is to look out for their welfare of their children above and beyond any other consideration. While it is true that Rav is Rav, and right, they're putting pressure on Rav, this is your opportunity. You paskin the halacha that the offspring of a non-Jewish man and a Jewish woman is totally permitted. And look what you could accomplish over here. Marry off your daughter to this guy, and lemaisa, again, people will see that the ruling is concretized. And Rav says, I don't care if this guy is Yoshua ben Nun. I'm not marrying my daughter off to him. Why not? We don't know. But Rav had a consideration for his child. Maybe it wasn't the right move for his daughter to be in this family. Maybe this guy was a nudnik, or maybe a whole variety of other things. So Rav was getting pressure to go ahead and put position over family. And instead, Rav puts family over position. I will say it is an incredibly profound yesod, and I think Rav comes out of this the hero, not the villain. Because I will say sometimes we put so many things above family, and we prioritize so many things above our children, knowingly and unknowingly. Rav said it's true, I paskin halacha, but this is my daughter, and this is not the right shidduch for her, for whatever the reason. I understand, I got it, I could be like the big median camel dancing in a small jug, whatever that means, right? It'll be incredible, and people always remember it. This is not the right thing for my child. And the welfare of my child comes before anything and everything else. Such an incredible yesod. The Gemara goes weiter. Rav Masna more balatira. Even Rav Masna held that the offspring of an akum and a Jewish woman is permitted. So the Gemara says, Va'af Rav Yehuda more balatira. Dichi as Rav Yehuda. Dichi as l'kamid Rav Yehuda. Amar lei zil itmar. So most listen to this. One time, and again, a young man like this came before Rabbi Yehuda, right? Offspring, his mother was Jewish, father not Jewish. He came before Rabbi Yehuda. He said, Rabbi Yehuda, what should I do? Right? He was having problems getting a shidduch, so what should I do? So the Gemara says, so Rabbi Yehuda said to him, Zil itmar, o nasi bas minach. Either go somewhere where no one knows you. And if you go somewhere where no one knows you, or you're not obligated to divulge any more information about your genealogy. Rabbi Yehuda was saying, you're totally fit. You're totally kosher. People get hung up on this. We'll say it's not a new thing that people get hung up on things for shidduchim, right? People always got hung up on things for shidduchim. So they say, just go somewhere where no one knows you, right? So again, if they don't know who your father is, they don't know your mother, just go and get married and you're totally fine. Or find another girl who's in the same situation as you are. Unfortunately, there's no shortage of people who have a non-Jewish father and a Jewish mother. You can marry a girl like that and Shalom Yisrael. Or again, you don't have to. You can marry any Jewish woman. But Lamaisa, go somewhere else where no one knows you. So the Gemara says, again, Rav gave same advice. Gali, exile. So in other words, go somewhere no one knows you, or marry a girl who's just like you. Shalchu le b'nei michsi l'Rabba. Listen to this, Rabbi say. So the people of Bnei Michsi, sent a question to Rabbi. Misha Chatzia Chatzia ben Chor. Listen to this case. Let's say a guy is a Chatzia Eved Chatzia ben Chor. So let's remember again, how do you have a case like this? Reuven and Shimon own a non-Jewish slave together. What happens? Reuven emancipates his part, Shimon doesn't emancipate his part. So I'll say, yeah, this guy is stuck, right? He is literally a Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin, half slave, half free man, which I will say totally messes him up because Lamaisi he can't marry anyone, right? And even his personal status is so confusing. So the Gemara, listen to this. Oh, what happens if a Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin fathers a child with a Jewish woman? Mahu. What's the halacha? Amarle, hashta eved kula amri kasher chatziav mibai. So they asked this question to Rabbi. Rabbi said, listen, if a full eved doesn't impact the offspring, then the chatzi eved chatzi ben choron won't impact the offspring. Amar Rav Yosef said, Mara dishmaita. Who is the one who said this ruling? Rashi says, who is the one who said that if a non-Jew fathers a child with a Jewish woman, that the offspring is okay? So Mar Deshmaita Manu Memheam Beis Rabbi Yehuda V'Hamar Rabbi Yehuda Misha Chatzi Chatzi Ben Choron Abba Bas Yisrael O Savlad Ein Lo Takana. Yet Rabbi Yehuda himself said that if a Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Choron fathers a child with a Jewish woman, the offspring is stuck. Ein Lo Takana. Now, why is that, Rabbi? Take a look at Rashi. Havlad in lo takana bebas yisrael kolomar mamzerhu. Rabbi say it sounds like what Rabbi Yehuda is saying is that when a Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin fathers a child with a Jewish woman, that child is a mamzer. That child is a mamzer. Now, why is that? So the Gemara says, Ki itmar Rabbi Yehuda kegon dikadish bas Yisrael. So Rabbi say, listen to this. It sounds like over here that halacha lemaisa, when is it problematic if a Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin has a child with a Jewish woman? If he's Makadesher. Listen to this fascinating case. Imagine a Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin gives Kesef Kiddush and is Makadesh, a Jewish woman. So he marries a Jewish woman. So we'll say, listen to this. The Nimtza Sad Avdus Shebo Mishtamish Be'eshesish. I will say, this is fascinating. When a Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin, he's Makadesh, a Jewish woman. I will say, does the Kiddushin work? If he gives, imagine, Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin gives Kesef Kiddushin to a Jewish woman. Does it work? Does it work? It kind of works. In other words, I will say, this guy is kind of like a split personality. So it works with half of him, right? It works with the half of him that's emancipated. The problem is, when he has relations with her, it's the totality of him that is having relations with her, which means that when he has relations with her, it's almost as if there's two people. There's the Jew and there's the Eved. And the Eved is having relations with a married woman. A married woman. And therefore, again, I will say that's how Rabbi Yehuda would say that such an act will create mamzerus, because the Eved is having relations with a Jewish Eshes Ish. That's why it creates mamzerus. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, Kigon the Kadash, Misha Chatzi Ben Chorin es Bas Yisrael ve'achar ba'alel. The Kevin the Kichav Mekudesh Tzad Cherus, Aval Tzad Avdus Nimtzat Tzad Eved Sheba Mishtamish Be'eshes Ish. The Ficha Chavlad Mamzer. Both say, isn't that wild? V'Amrinar Dai Mishay Rabbi Yaakov the Divrei Posel Afilu Be'Pnuya the Divrei Machshe Afilu Be'eshes Ish. So both say comes along the Nar Daim. Saying Rabbi Yaakov, no. Those who say that Chatzi Eved Chatzi Ben Chorin creates mamzerus, ultimately, again, with an Eved, I should say differently. Those who go ahead and say, let's work backwards. Those who say that Eved Haba Abbas Yisrael ultimately is kosher, is going to say kosher even if the Eved is having relations with a married woman. And those who say that it's puzzle are going to say that it's puzzle even by a single woman. Ushneim lo lamdua ela me'eshes av. And I will say both of them learn it out from the case of Eshes Av, father's wife. Look at Rashi. Ela me'eshes av. The mamzerus legabah d'chsiv lo yikach eshes aviv d'samichle lo yava mamzer. So we'll say, here's what we know, right? A man marries his father's wife. Isser erva, right? Isser kares. And ultimately, again, if you have a child like that, that child is a mamzer. Okay? Then I will say, watch this. Here we go. Man de Pasel, so the one who says that an Eved Haba Abbas Yisrael, whether she's married or single, the child will be a mamzer. Savar, ma eshes avlo tafsi bakidushin havlad mamzer, av kol delo tafsi bakidushin havlad mamzer. So they will say, what's unique about a father's wife? Kiddushin is not tofsin. Right? If you try to marry your father's wife, it doesn't work. Doesn't work. Kiddushin is not tofsin. And the offspring is a mamzer. So too, any case where Kiddushin doesn't work, the offspring is a mamzer. Therefore, when an Eved has relations with a non-Jewish woman, fathers a child, Rabbi say, is there any Kiddushin between an Eved and a Jewish woman? And the answer is absolutely, unequivocally, no. Therefore, the offspring is a mamzer. Uman demachsher, the one who says ultimately the offspring is mutar, he'll hold ma eshes avdili didei lo tafsi bakidushin lachrini tafsi bakidushin lafuki oved kocham ve'eved lo tafsi bakidushin klal. See, Rabbi say, here's what's different. The case of eshes av, it's true. I can't marry my father's wife, but Rabbi say, but who can? Who can? Anyone besides me, right? So lamaisa, that's what's unique about eshes av. In other words, the paradigm is something that is an isser erva to me, but mutter to others. That's what case mamzerus. But someone, Rabbosai, who is totally outside of the framework of Kiddushin altogether, right, doesn't have a seat at the table of Jewish marriage, like an Eved, like an Akum, cannot produce mamzerus. Eliki itmar de Rabbi Yehuda, rather Rabbosai, one knows Rabbi Yehuda's position stated, listen to this, Kigon sheba al ishes ish. Oh, Rabbi says the following case, where Chatzi Eved, Chatzi Ben Chorin has relations, not with his own wife, but with someone else's wife. V'nimtza tzadchirus shebo mishtamish be'eshes ish. See, Rabbi say ultimately again in that case, where Chatzi Eved, Chatzi Ben Chorin has relations with a married woman, again, but not his own wife, right? Another married woman, that creates mamzerus. Why, Rabbi? Why does that create mamzerus? That makes sense. Because remember, again, half of this guy is full Jew. He's full Jew, which means that part of him is engaging in an act of adultery, illicit, illegal, and therefore that will produce mamzerus. Incredible. Says the Gemara, Amar Ravina, Amar li Rav Gaza Ikla. So I'm sorry. Good. Amar Ravina, Amar li Rav Gaza Ikla, Rabbi Yossi bar Avin la'asrin, v'have uvda bepinuya. So as I listen to this story. So ultimately, again, they came to the city, la'asrin, v'have uvda bepinuya. There was this episode with a single girl. What was the episode of the single girl? She was pregnant by a non-Jewish man. V'achsher, and they ultimately ruled that the offspring is going to be mutar, be'eshes ish upasel. I'll say, what's be'eshes ish? Rashi says over here, actually, no, I'm sorry, not yet. Be'eshes ish with a married woman, and ruled ultimately again that the offspring would be pasal. So I'll say, so again, there are two cases. Both cases involving non-Jewish men. One case, non-Jewish father, single Jewish girl. They paskined the baby is kosher. Second case, non-Jewish man, married woman, or married to someone else, ultimately paskined that the offspring is a mamzer. Amar of Sheshes, Lididi Amali Rav Gaza, Lo Rabbi Yossi bar Avin Hava El Rabbi Yossi bar Zvida. It wasn't Rabbi Yossi bar Avin, rather it was Yossi bar Zvida. Hava Achsher bein bepnuya bein be'eshes ish. Actually, paskined that halacha lemaisa, that the offspring is kosher, whether both with a single woman and a married woman. So both say, according to this position, what this is saying is, whenever an akum fathers a child with a Jewish woman, whether she's married or unmarried, obviously illegal, but lamaisa not mamzerus. I was about to say, this is the opinion that holds mamzerus can only come from someone who is in the parsha of kiddushin. If you're not in the parsha of Jewish marriage at all, then lamaisa, again, there's no mamzerus in that. To which the Gemara says, Ikla amemar la'asrin v'achrin shirbein. Pretty good. V'hilchasa, we'll say, what's the halacha? Oved kochav ve'eved abba bas Yisrael havlad kosher bein bepnuya bein be'eshes ish. And about how do we pass? What is the Gemara? So what's the halacha l'maisa? If an oved kochavim or an Eved has relations with a Jewish woman, whether she is married or whether she is single, the child ultimately, again, is kosher. Is kosher. And I just want to point out, that is how the Shulchan Aruch paskins. In Evena Ezer, Simin Dalid, Sif Yotes, Shulchan Aruch writes, Akum ve'eved shabo ala mamzeres, hala mamzer, v'imbo al bas Yisrael, bein pnuya, bein eshes ish, havlad kosher, but upogum l'kahuna. So Rabbi say, remember again. So this is incredibly important. Therefore, again, you have a situation, Rabbi say, and this is, by the way, meisim b'chol yom. A Jewish woman married a non-Jewish man, intermarried, has a child, has a daughter, right? Has a child. Child becomes a chozer b'tshuva, right? Wants to be from. But now again, what do I do with a non-Jewish father? So what do you do with a non-Jewish father? So first of all, you respect him, you honor him, you give him kavod because he's your father, and you don't use your Yiddishkeit as an excuse to disrespect anyone, chas v'shalom. But Lamaisa now, Lamaisa, what's my status? And what's the answer? What's the answer? Totally kosher. With a wrinkle. What's the wrinkle? What's the wrinkle? If it's a girl, she cannot marry a Kohen. And I will say this is important because sometimes people don't know this halacha. And so what ends up happening is it happens where, let's say, a girl becomes a choseres b'tshuva, she wants to get married, she doesn't realize about this kahuna piece, but it is a halacha. Again, bidi eved, there's whole discussions in the poskim, but lamaisa, and I will say, by the way, I want to point out, a Jewish woman has an affair with a non-Jewish man, has a child. Again, want to go on the record, not good, right? Not good, don't, right? But lemaisa, the offspring is kosher. I mean, now again, I will say that's a whole different discussion, by the way, that in general, we would assume that if she has a child, we generally have a concept in halacha of rov bi'ilos achar habal. We assume when a woman becomes pregnant, even if she committed adultery, right? The halacha says that the de facto status is that child belongs to the husband, because we assume the majority of the times that she is intimate is with her husband, not with anyone else. But lamaisa, again, even if we're to know that it is the akum's child, the child is kosher, but pago. And I will say that is halacha lemaisa. Rava achsher lemari bar Rachel. So umanye beparse debava. I will say this is also incredible. So Rav said Rav Mari bar Rachel. I will say, who is Rav Mari bar Rachel? Rashi says over here, Rav Mari bar Rachel me ovid kochav mabal. Says, we'll say Rachel, who was Shmuel's daughter, was taken captive. She was violated by her captors. She became pregnant. Interestingly enough, we know the name of her captor. The name of her captor was a guy by the name of Isser. Interesting name, right? Isser converts, and later on, after his conversion, marries Rachel. An incredible twist of fate. But yet Rav Mari, right? Isser was not Rav Mari's halachic father. He was his biological father, but not his halachic father, because he fathered him when he was still a non-Jew. Therefore, Rav Mari is always known as by his mother's name, Rav Mari bar Rachel. So Rava went ahead and publicly solidified the yichus of Rav Mari, saying that Rav Mari was totally kosher. Umanye beparse de Bavel, and ultimately he gave him a leadership position. Right? Rabbi say he made him like one of the Gabban, one of the leaders in Bavel. The afagav damar som tasim alecha melech. Even though again the pasuk says, "Place upon you a king," and the pasuk says, "Mekerav achecha kol misimo sha'atam asim al yu el mekerav achecha." I will say in general for leadership positions, it has to be from someone who comes from within the Jewish community. And again, not a convert, but someone who comes from within the Jewish community. So the Gemara says, Hi kevan diuma Yisrael mikerev achicha karina be. Since Rav Mari ultimately again had a Jewish mother, he was considered to be mikerev achecha. So I will say really incredible. So Rava really did two things for Rav Mari. Number one, he publicly declared that ultimately, again, his genealogy was 1,000% fit. And number two, how did he show that? He gave him a leadership position. By giving him a leadership position, he was showing ultimately what? That Rav Mari bar Rachel satisfies the criteria of Mikerev Achecha, being within the midst of Klal Yisrael. I'll say we'll have to stop over here. Incredible Gemara. Shkoyach everyone, and a good night. All right, Chavra on Zoom. Everyone have a great day. A good night, everyone. A great pass, yeah. It, it's huge. In other words, from a people perspective, it's pretty overwhelming, because without that psak halacha, where would we be? Because intermarriage